section from Fayetteville that we designed, Barbara designed, that's part of the Razorback Greenway. Then sort of some of the aspects with the bike plan, so it includes bike lanes. So when we're talking about a bike lane, what does that mean? We're looking at a lane that's right here, that's sort of separated from the traffic. You've got a little buffer here that makes it safer for the bicyclist, makes it more comfortable for them to use. A lot of times when a bicycle uses a bike lane, they feel exposed, they kind of feel a little bit unsafe because cars tend to crowd that line that's on that side. And so having a little bit of buffer kind of makes it a better experience for folks that maybe are a little bit more shy in that instance. So this would be on roads where you've got a little bit more traffic, but not something like Reynolds Road. Maybe something that maybe like Boone Road, you might potentially have maybe a bike lane on a road like that. And then bike routes. And bike routes essentially are just areas where you have a little sharrow that's signed on the road, and then a sign that sticks out beside it that tells bicyclists that this is a route that you can use, and this route eventually will connect to other things. And so this is really kind of a low-cost type of thing to do there.
Is that one also shared by cars?
Yes. So this is a street.
But it's just a low traffic area.
It's a really, really low traffic street is what this says.
They call that a sharrow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which indicates to cars, you might see bicycles here. Be
Okay.
careful.
So it's for both users for both of them to know. If bikes are present, look out.
That looks like it might be a one-way street, just according to how the cars are parked.
That's possible. It's an image that
Yeah.
I picked up off the internet. And then also master street plan. So part of the master street plan is looking at maybe some alternative design standards that might look at some new types of intersections or different types of things. So maybe looking at things like roundabouts in areas. And also where future streets will go, how wide those streets will be, and how existing streets will be improved. Sort of setting standards for those things. So really just talking about where the new streets are going to be and how we're going to improve them over time. So really what this is all about is sort of a comprehensive and integrated system that looks at transportation for pedestrians, bicycles, and cars, all integrated and comprehensive. So that when we're not going back and looking at this later and like, oh yeah, well this would be cool for something like that. It's that when new infrastructure is built, when new streets are built, that we're accommodating for all of these users as part of it. Either through sidewalk, through a trail, through a bike lane, or obviously through a roadway that allows for the car to be used. So it's all about being comprehensive and integrated with the transportation system. So why would we care? Obviously we understand it's important to have roads. That's obvious, right? We got to have roads because people got to go to work, they got to go to the store, they got to buy things. But why would we care about bike and pedestrian infrastructure? That's something that I think is a big question. There's some real key benefits that are really kind of summed up, I think, overall in these right here. The economic, health and fitness, conservation, and utility maintenance. Those are sort of some of the key ones that I think are big. When you look at it from an economic perspective, the way that this affects sort of the economic benefits, it sort of branches in a larger umbrella of being quality of life. So quality of life is really, in a lot of ways, the new economic driver for communities, particularly smaller communities. Because when you're thinking about economic development, what the millennials and a lot of folks are doing now is they locate in a place where they want to live and then they find a job. And so there's places like Northwest Arkansas that are making huge investments in quality of life because they have to find the best talent. So they've already got this infrastructure in place with all these Fortune 500 companies, but they're finding it a hard time to get really, really smart people to move there. And so what are they doing? They're improving their downtowns, they're improving their bike and pedestrian infrastructure, they're just making that whole area a nicer place to live. And that's becoming an economic driver. And this is something that plays out in community after community after community after community. It's becoming quality of life is one of the largest determinative economic development factors. It's not about chasing smokestacks anymore. It's not about throwing the biggest incentive that you can towards a company. with the hope that they'll be here for 5 years and then leave, which often happens a lot of times. So it's about making investments in your community, making a nicer place to live in the hopes that that's going to attract new residents, that it's going to attract new businesses, it's going to attract new industries, that it will help with tourism. Tourism is becoming a thing in Northwest Arkansas. And that was weird. When I was in college, we didn't think about people coming to Northwest Arkansas to do stuff. I mean, you would come to the game, that was a lot of fun, but now people go specifically to Northwest Arkansas to do the shopping, to go to the downtowns and see everything, to ride the Razorback Greenway. It's becoming a thing. So it's really interesting. So there's this whole economic piece that this is actually, you can view bike and pedestrian infrastructure as an economic development investment. And it's kind of weird to think about it that way, but it is. So some of the economic benefits with this. Here's an example that's, I think, is really tangible for any homeowner. Typically, there is some sort of price benefit to being close to a trail in terms of the value of your home. So in this instance, in Indianapolis, they had property that was close to the mountain trail there. They saw an 11% increase in the sales price for a home when it was, a half mile closer to the trail. Now, when you think about that, what does that equate to? If you got a $150,000 home, a $20,000 home, you're looking $15,000, $20,000. Now, a lot of times you can put in a new kitchen and get $15,000 or $20,000 more, or the city can build a trail and you can get $15,000 or $20,000 more. So that's pretty neat. So it actually has a definitive benefit to the homeowner that lives adjacent to this infrastructure, somebody that lives near it. It's a big benefit. Just like living near a school raises your property value. It's an amenity that the community enjoys, that when you've got that, it's going to be important. Here in Memphis, Tennessee, the Broad Avenue Arts District, they added a bike lanes program. There in that area, they had 16 new businesses. 29 properties ended up getting renovated. I was talking to an individual that works with me, and he was talking about sort of the light rail line that they've built in Charlotte, North Carolina. And with that light rail line, what they've seen happen is a lot of new development. And so they started drilling down. It's like, okay, why exactly is this new development occurring? And they realized it's not really because of the light rail line, it's because they built a lot of new trails through there. And so in surveying people and the reasons that they made the decisions and the reasons that the development occurred was because of the trail. You look at the Beltline in Atlanta, which is an old rail corridor that they've converted into a trail now, that they've had a lot of development, a lot of infill growth that has gone near that because people want to be closer to the trail. We've also started to see this happen in Northwest Arkansas along the Razorback Greenway. It's becoming an area that businesses want to be close to. Here's an article from Talk Business and Politics, saying Razorback Greenway is already providing a benefit for local businesses. It's kind of interesting because it's talking about the Apple Blossom Brewing Company that's in Fayetteville. Beer and bikes, for some reason, is a combination that people really love. They like to bike, and then once they get done biking, drink a beer. Or they like to bike, go to the beer place, drink a beer, and bike a little bit more. But in this instance, the Apple Blossom Brewing Company, what they've determined is a quarter to a third of their business is driven by the trail. So the fact that they're by the trail helps drive business to their location. So this is a direct economic benefit for this area because it's something that would not exist for them otherwise. So that's sort of the economic benefits in looking at this.
Police don't usually pull you over for drunk driving on a trail.
It is possible. It's
possible, but
yeah. So kind of shifting to the second that we looked at is sort of the health and wellness thing. So I've got great news. Arkansas is number one. Here's the bad news. We're number one in obesity. And part of this relates to the fact that the way that we have built our environment. Arkansas is one of the states that drives more than anybody else. That's because we like to live, my cousin's a good example of this. He lives in Leola. Does anybody know where Leola is? He lives in the outer suburbs of Leola. It's outside of Prattsville. So in that area. If you know where Dory's is, you just keep going a little bit further after you reach Dory's, and then you'll get to where my cousin lives in Leola. So he lives in Leola, wonderful house, great place to live, it's great, it's out in the middle of nowhere, he enjoys it. And he drives to Whitehall every day to work.
Mm.
So that's like an hour, hour and a half to work. In Arkansas, in terms of commuter miles, that's a pattern that we see over and over and over again, that people live pretty far from where they work. Or overall, people in Arkansas, we just generally like to drive. That's something that, we do. There's consequences with that kind of lifestyle, though. And I'm kind of leading the charge here with that 35.9% obesity rate, is that people don't get out, that they're not active. And so the way that we've designed cities, the fact that we don't have this infrastructure that is built in where we have to move, that we're living sort of these sedentary lives, that contributes to obesity. And so that's one of the health and wellness benefits, sort of the health and fitness benefits that having a trail system has. So you look here, here's a little infographic. 50 people that live near trails are 50% more likely to get enough exercise. That's crazy. Just something that is passive to that, because it's like, oh, there's a nice place to go walk. I think I'll go walk. Or you look at this, if you live in a walkable community, you're 2 times as likely to get enough physical exercise during the day. What do we mean by a walkable neighborhood? That means an area that, kind of think of the Hillcrest or the Heights neighborhood, where you've got small businesses and then you've got, a lot of restaurants around there, and then the neighborhood that spills over it. So for the folks that live around there, and home prices are really high because of this, because of that great amenity, you can walk from the house, go to the grocery store, you can walk from the house, go down and eat dinner, and then walk back home. So it's kind of this walkable scale type big amenity.
I think there's lots of places around Bryant where you could walk to, except that it's too dangerous to walk.
Yeah.
I think that's the point.
The first step of being a walkable community is having the infrastructure to actually walk.
Right.
Mhm.
That's a big thing. Another infographic right here. And sometimes it's just simple things. In this area in New Orleans, they installed a new bike lane. They saw an increase in bike traffic that's by 225%. One of the things that you often hear is people say, well, why do we need to put that infrastructure in? Nobody bikes. Well, part of the reason nobody bikes is because the infrastructure doesn't exist. So people don't feel safe doing it. And so, a small thing like that can really improve use. Or sidewalks and crosswalks. There's a study that showed in Florida, Mississippi, Texas, Washington, Wisconsin, that walking and biking to school increased by 37% after they just put some sidewalks in and put crosswalks in. It's, again, those things of kind of thinking about and reorienting our environment to think about how we get to places and how that's experienced for bikes, cars, people. Looking at it, sort of that broad perspective. Another benefit is sort of this environmental preservation, environmental conservation. So a lot of times what you have are trails that run alongside creeks. That's what makes trails interesting, is that it runs next to a river, it runs next to a creek, and so it's neat. The kids can run down and play in the creek and try to catch crawdads. You ever been in the Hot Springs Creek Trail? That's, when we're visiting over there, we'll drive just to go walk down the Hot Springs Creek Trail so that we can go catch crawdads with kids. So it's one of those things that's fun. But this actually has, just the fact that it's there actually has a considerable environmental benefit. So who remembers the 2008 floods here? So one of the reasons that happened is overdevelopment. You've got development that goes into the flood fringe. So you see right here, this is a floodplain. So you have an instance where people fill in areas kind of overdeveloped where they're filling in that. They're raising the property out of the floodplain, but that floodplain doesn't go away. That floodplain just shifts somewhere else. And so when you have this over and over and over, it ends up creating these flood hazards that didn't exist before. And so that's one thing that if you actually just have a trail there, then that area is not developed. You're not raising the elevation of it. It will occasionally flood, and it's not having the same kind of impact that you would have if you put all of this fill in, and then you got a 20-year rain event, and suddenly that 20-year rain event is a 50-year or 100-year rain event because the environment has really changed. So Other benefits are in terms of soil conservation, the fact that it's, you know, landscaped and things like that, that it helps prevent erosion from sort of the soil washing away in the creek, and sort of degrading the water in the creek. So those are, you know, I think those are definitely some tangible things. But I think one of the neater things about the sort of the conservation aspect of this is it can create really beautiful natural spaces inside of your city when it runs along a creek or it's somewhere like that. So my family lived in Bryant for a very long time. I was born in Benton, raised in Benton, went to Benton High School, live in Little Rock now. And we live in the St. Charles neighborhood, and there's a trail, the Rock Creek Trail, that runs right close to our house. Now, can you imagine, does anybody have any idea how close this is to Target? That's like within a stone's throw of Target.
Yeah.
And you're walking out here, and it looks like this pristine environment. Now, you can hear the traffic and all of that, but you've got all these wonderful woods, and it's just a tract of land that's, you know, 40 acres or something that's somewhat undeveloped because it's a creek and it's not real useful for stuff. And so me and my son will go out there and tootle around, walk along the trail, and he'll find a stick and find rocks to throw. But it's this natural space that you're living inside of a city.
Is this behind Target or the area on farther down?
Yeah, Target's like right over here.
Rock,
Okay.
Rock Creek.
It's
We
literally
sit
within a stone's
by the
throw.
St. Charles neighborhood. We used to live in the St. Charles neighborhood, so we
Oh,
know where
okay.
you're talking about.
Yeah.
Well, I'm thinking of the area that's in between where Chenal splits, the area in between the lanes.
So it goes from the area in between where Chenal is, runs under Chenal, goes back around behind Target, and then comes over to Bowman Curve.
Okay.
Yeah, it's over, it runs.
I've
through.
never gotten out and gotten in that area
It is.
because I'd have to go park. in some
It's really
places.
beautiful, yeah, there's bass in the creek, and so we'll take Brett out there and try to get him trained, so maybe one day we're gonna take a fishing pole out there and just take one out real quick, and he'll have an easy catch. But it's kind of a neat benefit to have that, and then all you have to do is build a trail out there, and then it becomes an amenity for everybody.
Mhm.
You know, we've already got some of these with sort of the Mills Park
Right.
Natural Area, that trail that runs through there. So it's not something that's not something we don't have in Bryant. But there's other potential areas where we can do that. Me and Truett were out one day in Bishop Park, walking around. I forgot we were doing something, certifying something for a grant application. And I just looked out in this field and I saw it and I was like, wow, this would be a cool area if this was cleared out more, or if it grew up more to have a little trail that ran along there. That's Hurricane Creek. Now, you'd have to fight the mosquitoes off. That's definitely a thing. But I can imagine that would be, there's a lot of little hidden natural areas out there that would be cool to explore for an adult, for a kid. So something to get us back out in nature. And this is along Crooked Creek. You got this section here. That's a really, pretty creek. It's really clear water. And here's the sort of that Deb's Wood parking area where the new bridge was built through there in about 2006. That you can run a creek up through there and run it back down to Mills Park and have a connection between Lowe's and Mills Park. It'd be kind of a neat thing. Another benefit is with utility maintenance. And so a lot of times trails will, because they run along creeks or they run along in low areas where it's more likely to flood, that's also where you end up having sewer infrastructure. So it's ideal when you can do this to have a sewer line that runs near a trail. Now that sounds kind of gross, and obviously you don't want to have overflows and things like that. But the real benefit of this is if you've got to do work on the sewer line, and you've got an area that is real easy to get a truck in there and actually go in there and do repairs. So it ends up costing less for the city to maintain its infrastructure. So it's all of these things that there's a lot of aspects to this that make it beneficial. So switching to talk a little bit about the plan, taking the salesman hat off and talking a little bit about the plan itself. So the bike aspect of the plan, first we have bike routes. And bike routes are really kind of the lowest level of the infrastructure It's the lowest cost infrastructure. It's the thing that, in phase one of the bike plan, will be the thing that is really done first, because it costs so little to do that. You take existing streets and you add signage, you add these sharrows, like it's indicated right there. A good example would be Southwest 3rd Street. It's an area where people already ride bikes, Carmichael, area where people already ride bikes. You put a sharrow down, put a bike route sign so that more people understand that this is a good area to ride your bike, traffic's low, all of those kinds of things. So building off of that, then you look at bike lanes. And bike lanes can either go in existing streets, so there's some streets where the width of the street's already kind of wide, so Prickett Road, where it's wide enough that you could actually put a bike lane in there and fit that in there. But it also happened, these would go on new or widened streets. And so you would either have just a direct bike lane right here, where the minimum width would be 4 or up to 6 feet in width, or you can have a buffered lane with a minimum buffer of 1.5 feet up to 3 feet of buffer, depending on how much traffic that you have there. When you have the buffer, it's obviously a safer condition for a bike rider. These are generally low to medium cost. When you're thinking about something like bike lanes on an existing street, it's the cost of restriping the street, so it doesn't cost very well. If you're talking about a widened street, then that's something that needs to be factored in when you're looking at sort of the idea of widening the street. So one thing that you can do, maybe as an option is this, is you've got a street and you think that street might have more traffic in the future. Well, you could build a bike lane in there, build the buffer in there, and then actually have sort of an area for the bikes to ride, and then if traffic becomes a bigger issue in the future, you've got 2 lanes. So that's something that can be thought about in terms of looking at that. Particularly if you've got an 11-foot lane, you've got a 6-foot bike lane, and a 3-foot buffer, you've got 20 feet. That's two 10-foot lanes. So something to think about. That's kind of a possibility. That would depend on case-by-case situation. So areas where we're talking about where we've got existing bike lanes, here on Show Road, that was an area. Chief Avenue, that new road that was built has bike lanes there. There's not a lot of bike lane infrastructure existing. Sort of on the Bryant PARKWay up here is where some is existing. But where we're talking about putting bike lanes, here coming out of the Midtown development is part of that. Here along Prickett Road, so tying back over here, that would ultimately connect in some way over to this over here. Some along Mills Park Road, and that's improved. Over here, there's a proposed street over here as well. Rogers, we tie this neighborhood back in. This is a street that can be immediately retrofitted to allow for bike lanes. Now, you just go in and restripe it. You have bike lanes and have a sort of easier access over to Mills Park. And then these red areas are proposed bike routes, so Carmichael Road, a lot of these in the Old Town Park, some areas through here. In this neighborhood up through here, we've got some proposed through there. Kind of have a connection between Spring Hill over here to, I forget which one's that called?
Hilldale?
No, the street that comes straight out of Reynolds Road.
The street that comes straight out of Reynolds Road.
Commonwealth?
I can't remember.
Oh.
Nobody knows. So it's
Is it Commonwealth?
Are you talking about where you go straight on across at the?
Yeah, Commonwealth.
Commonwealth.
Yeah, Commonwealth, okay. Yeah, Commonwealth, okay. So having a connection through that neighborhood that allows us with that. The trails plan, so we've got, as I talked about a little bit earlier, we've got two types. We've got sort of these road adjacent trails, that these would largely be constructed when the road's improved. So you're doing a road improvement and then add a 12-foot shared use path along it. Other areas where you got a greenway, this would be separated from a road. This would likely be along a creek bed or something like that, or through a newly developed property, something along those lines. So the idea, a lot of the plan is geared more heavily towards trails. And the reason being is that it's better for more users. It's better for kids. You don't want kids necessarily riding down Boone Road with a little bit of paint separating them from a big car. So it's much safer for a kid to be riding down a trail. Most adults aren't comfortable. Most adults are inexperienced riders, and we want to encourage more people to get out. And so having sort of a separated trail where it feels safer would be good. And particularly elderly folks. You want to have accessibility for all ages. And so that's definitely something good. So these are safer. They're obviously more preferred for a wider segment of the population. You'll always have some of the folks that are gonna ride down Reynolds Road, or they're gonna ride down Highway 5. It doesn't matter what's going on. They're still gonna do it. They're gonna claim that lane and ride forever. Another benefit of these is that they really can become a destination. They can become a place where people go. It's really interesting, the Arkansas River Trail in Little Rock, how that has become a destination. I mean, I remember when me and my wife were before we had kids, we'd have our a date night and try to think of stuff to do that maybe wasn't too expensive. And we said, well, okay, let's just go walk across a big damn bridge, or let's go walk down the trail for a while and do that. And so it becomes a destination, which is really interesting. In terms of cost, these kind of range from medium to high cost, depending on the materials that are used, whether you use like an aggregate rock or concrete or asphalt. And when you have to think about sort of land acquisition, those kinds of things that factor into the cost that is associated with that. An example in the plan would be the Hurricane Creek Trail. So here's some example of trails that we've got proposed in the plan. So right here, this is what we call the Boone Rail Trail. And the Boone Rail Trail would actually start at Alcoa Park. So Alcoa Park, you see the part that's actually developed with ball fields and everything. That property actually extends down over here behind, I think that's Cherry Creek, that development right there. So they have all of this property. Well, the Bryant Parkway is proposed to come through there, and there'll be a shared use path that would come down there. So you would take from the Bryant Parkway in Alcoa Park and take a trail, and it would run along the north side of the railroad. So through that area, come down to the sort of the heart of Bryant in this area, come along through here, and then cross over Boone Road, and actually run along Boone Road and go all the way to Benton. So this would actually be a trail that would run from Benton all the way to Alcoa Park. And so on the south side of town, this would really be one of the sort of the prime east-west trails that we have. This would be a really cool destination. This would be a destination kind of trail, because you're linking. It's not that far from the school here. It's not that far from Mills Park. You'll have a connection coming here, Cole Park, and the Bishop Park. You've got all these school divisions that go on through here. And you've got the sort of the heart of Bryant that is intended to redevelop as a sort of a walkable urban type of neighborhood. An alternative to this would be to connect this area. Let's say that if it only came to the park right here, the Bishop Park, and you could use the internal the trail network here, and actually come out through here. There's a sewer easement that runs over to this development that's right here, and this would run along the creek and come over here to Hurricane Creek Elementary. So this would be sort of an alternative that could also be developed if you wanted to do a separated trail that would link the school to this. Now, what's also neat about this is that you've got the trail that's being built as part of the Alcoa Road development, Alcoa Road improvements. So we'll have a trail here that's sort of a north-south connection and east-west over here. Bryant Parkway Trail. So the idea with Bryant Parkway Trail is to have sort of a little sliver of trail that runs here on the south side of the railroad. So you'd have a trail on the north side of the railroad, a trail on the south side of the railroad. Come down to the heart of Bryant, and then eventually have another piece of trail that connects down here to Hill Farm Elementary. But that's not officially part of the Bryant Parkway Trail, I guess. Have sort of a wide shoulder for bike riders to really get up to speed along this area. And then we would have a shared use trail runs along the road, comes up here, turns into bike lanes through here, goes along this extension north of Highway 5, and kind of just continues up the road there, going on further. So in terms of a north-south trail on sort of the east side of town, this would be the one. It would really provide a long, continuous stretch. Be one of the areas where you could get over the interstate. So it would be kind of another neat destination. This section through here will be coming in just a few years. So this is going to be one of the first pieces of actual trail out of the trail system that will be built. Hurricane Creek Trail. This was one that I'm really very excited about. You'll see right here down on the bottom, on this sliver right here, that's the Southwest Trail. Now the Southwest Trail is proposed to be a trail that extends from Little Rock all the way to Hot Springs, a 60-mile trail largely along the old Rock Island Railroad corridor. So it's going to become a huge thing for Central Arkansas. I think it'll have a big tourism benefit. It'll have a big economic impact on the community. So as part of this plan, we thought about how can we integrate Bryant as much as possible into that trail and kind of capitalize on that infrastructure. So one of the ways we thought about this was the Hurricane Creek Trail. And this would start here down at basically where the old water tank was, at the Reynolds plant, that big water tank at the end of the Reynolds Aqueduct. It would start down there, run up Highway 183 Reynolds Road, and then continue and either use part of the actual run along part of Hurricane Creek. I think this may be where some of the Hurricane Creek battlefield is. I'm not sure where that skirmish was. That would be something we would have to research as we go through, because that could be sort of a potential interpretive site to show this is one of the only battles in Saline County that occurred as part of the Civil War. Or use the Bauxite Northern Railroad right-of-way right here. With all of the industrial going away here, Reynolds, Alcoa gone, there's really not anything that's using this, that piece of the railroad. Almatis uses the rail spur a little bit further up here, but it can just come over and come up Hurricane Creek and then cross Sinamai Road, come through Bishop Park, come back on here, hook up on that section of Woodland Park Road trail that exists currently. So there on Woodland Park Road. So here's Boone Road, and there's Woodland Park. And then actually come through the Lindsay development. One thing I think that would be a potential that we could explore is working with Lindsay Apartments to actually convert some of their cart paths to be used for trails over time. A lot of the developments that they've been doing in different states, because some of the golf is maybe not quite what it used to be in terms of folks, and I think generationally we'll see that less and less people are playing golf, and so what some of the things they're doing with some of their apartment complexes is actually converting those to trails. I mean, converting them to sort of wooded areas where they let it grow up and just have trails become part of that. And so that might be a potential long range where we look at that, come up, go underneath the interstate, and then this would be Benton's section here, inside of Benton, and then come over and go up Spring Hill Road, and then continue on up here north to sort of some of the end there with Creek. But if you look, if Bryant Parkway on the east side is really the big north-south trail, then on the west side, this is the big north-south trail. But it could be really potentially a pretty cool greenway trail that could be used, particularly in this area down here to the south, where it's just it's really wild, kind of a wild area. Crooked Creek Trail, this is another one that you've got Alcoa Park here, here's Mills Park. There's that creek that comes, here's Mills Park Road. There's a creek that runs along through here. It's actually called Crooked Creek. It runs up through here. Here's the Debswood Bridge that was built not too long ago, and has that little playground area, parking area. And actually continue up here. Here's Lowe's and that empty development site. Run along there. Come back over here and come up and go up Reynolds Road. So having either using part of the existing sidewalk or improving some of the sidewalk but having a good connection that comes through there. That's one that would be sort of a larger piece of trail, but I think that really kind of the neat thing is this would have a good benefit for that particular neighborhood.
So the new sidewalk that was put in along Reynolds Road is intended for bike traffic as well as foot traffic?
No, that's intended only for foot traffic,
Okay,
yeah. If it were to include bike traffic, then there would need to be another 5 lanes.
wider.
And you can do that, you can just add some more concrete in there in the future. So those were really trails. Now this is talking about the master street plan. So here are some of the sort of the big ideas that pertain to the sort of the street network. Here's Sonamide Road, or Wilkerson Road. So here's the Hill Farm Elementary that's down here. So this is that road that runs out to the Alcoa plant. Now currently, the way that this road runs is it comes along straight through here, and then it comes south to Almatis, comes all the way down here, Alcoa, and then ties into Alcoa Road over here. And looking at that, there's not a whole lot of areas where you can easily get across the railroad. There's a crossing that's downtown Bryant. But then when you think about it, the next one, I guess, would be down on the Benton Parkway, is sort of the next above grade crossing. And you have to go a ways to the north. Imagine some sort of disaster happens, some kind of derailment. A year or two ago, they had a big derailment on this rail line up in Walnut Ridge that made it very difficult to do anything in that area. So imagine for emergency services, things like that, it would be really good to have another crossing of the railroad somewhere. That's a bridge. So the idea behind this, and this would require cooperation between Benton and Bryant to sort of see this achieved, but you would take the road and instead of going down here by Almatis, it would actually go across the railroad. Here's Bishop Park right here. Have a bridge over the railroad and loop that down and then come straight out back over here to this road. Now what's off screen right here, that's North Shore Drive in Benton. So this would provide all the way over here from the airport, Reynolds Road, this area, you'd have a straight shot, boom, all the way over there, all the way to Military. So it would be a really good connection between Benton and Bryant in terms of traffic on the south side of the city.
I'm just picturing people trying to bike uphill on North Shore.
This is really, in a lot of ways, this is more about the street in this.
See these guys back here, they bike. They're more slender than we are.
I want to see y'all get up that hill, though.
Another big idea with sort of the street system is this area around Alcoa. So here's the Alcoa Exchange development right there. There's First Electric right there in that area. And with the Alcoa improvements, there's going to be a roundabout right here, a roundabout right there, and a roundabout right there where the road comes in. So there's sort of 3 key intersections right there. So, and a lot of this property in through here is undeveloped, or it's pretty low density development, meaning that somebody might own 5, 10 acres. Land that can be aggregated, put together, packaged for development. If you look at this site right here, the size of that site is actually equivalent to Walmart, the Walmart site that's on sort of the north side of the interstate. So if you look at this where we've got a street network that builds all of this out, this could actually become a really big shopping area through there. You could have some modification to the Alcoa Exchange right there and add some more shops along this back end of it. And so this could be a really huge shopping area for the city, could be a big benefit. And if we build the street network outright, then it could be basically like the Walmart area is on the north side of
Build
town.
it and they will come.
Hasn't that been declared a wetlands area?
Some of this has, yeah, some of it. And so that, if you're talking about residential development, residential development would probably be more difficult, because you would have to mitigate that, which means that you'd have to create more wetlands somewhere else or something like that. But if you're talking about a major commercial development where something real intensive, that's just kind of part of the name of the game of doing business, is mitigating wetlands. So.
But with the businesses like that, don't they have holding ponds and things that kind of could be turned
Yeah,
a
they would
wetland?
still have to, they would
There's
still
big
have to
ditches,
address drainage
big
and all of those
ponds.
things, yeah, that's still something that must be addressed.
Yeah,
It's just, when there is a designated wetland, and it's kind of off limits.
holding ponds don't help it, huh?
Yeah, and so in that instance, it's not really about drainage, it's about disturbing a wetland, so you need to create more wetlands to offset. Wetlands, there's kind of like a filtration system for the environment in
Yeah.
kind of a way, and so they're trying to preserve wetlands.
Well, not only that, but up toward Little Rock, near Vimy Ridge, for the flooding, they went so far as to dig all the little plants up that were endangered and kept them while they were working on the land and then planted them back.
Yeah. It's very interesting.
Yeah.
So this is another big area that you could have sort of interesting potential development occur there. Looking in close into the city, these are sort of ideas that have been talked about before. But here's the Spring Hill overpass right here. On the plan, we've got a proposed interchange in that location. I know that's been a fight with the highway department over a number of years, but as long as we can, we'll just continue to put it on a plan and till one day maybe they might say yes, I don't know.
Mhm.
But it doesn't hurt to put it on the plan. So we've got the Sheaf Avenue connection that was built recently. This is sort of a connection here, here's Middleton's right here, and here's Prickett Road. That would occur eventually, we connect Sheaf Avenue over here to Prickett Road. Sort of provide a parallel route that comes over here out to Reynolds. So you would have that. Then what we're also talking about, here's Royal Lane, and here's the post office, right there. And there's the stoplight, Lee Ranchito, kind of on the north side. The creek is there, the creek is just underground, you don't see the creek.
Oh.
The creek is there. So having a road that lines up with that, comes across through here, some of this is actually city property, comes down and connects into, this extension where you've got Shove Road, where it butts out right there. And actually have a connection for this neighborhood, it doesn't have to go through here and come out there. So it would sort of increase connectivity and also kind of provide some cross parallel routes there that make east-west traffic a little bit easier. So if you wanted to be here, you wouldn't have to go over here and come down here. It's trying to keep traffic off of Reynolds as much as possible. This section of Reynolds Road right here, it's about 27,000 cars a day. There's 20,000 people in Bryant. And I know those two things don't equate.
I want to know where they all come from down south.
It's just, there's a lot of
I don't
traffic.
know.
So that's,
Bauxite, Sardis, Traskwood, Shaw. Do you need more?
so for comparison, if you're thinking about this section of roadway right there, it's 27,000 cars a day. That's almost as much as Broadway in downtown Little Rock. In an area that's a whole lot more dense. The reason all of that traffic funnels there, the reason there's so much traffic there is because there's really poor connectivity in the
Mhm.
city. So anywhere that you are, in a lot of areas, the option to get out is to get on Reynolds Road and go. Get on Reynolds Road and go.
Yeah.
And so having better connectivity will help sort of allow people to go different ways so that if it's 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock or 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock, that you're like, yeah, maybe I don't want to go that way, maybe I'll go this alternate route. Figure out a different way. Bryant Parkway will also additionally help with that, and I think in a really dramatic fashion, will help impact a lot of the traffic on Reynolds Road. But these are things that are important as well. Bringing me to the Bryant Parkway. So here's sort of the idea in 3 different shots of what is proposed with the idea behind Bryant Parkway that's included part of the master street plan. So this is the existing section of Bryant Parkway that's right here. So here's Highway 5, and here's that nice little section that goes out to the sort of the overpass. What's proposed and the city has right of way for is a street to continue on and connect. Here's Hilltop and Hilldale, those two right there. And actually would eventually have a roundabout in that location. So having this, and this being sort of a big north-south connection in the future, where all the folks that live up here can come down this road, come down here, come around and get on the interstate. Or come down here, come around to the south side and come down here wherever you need to go, down further to the south. So you'd have this connection here that would come down. What was a part of the bond millage, included right here, is this section that will likely be built first is the connection between Show to sort of the Raymar overpass right there, that section of Bryant Parkway. That's the first section that will be constructed, it's included in front of that. As part of that, when we build that new street, we want development to sort of leverage some of that public investment that's been made. And so once this goes in, we know that developers are going to follow. We know that development's going to occur in that area. It's sort of a given. When somebody builds a street for you and it improves connectivity a whole lot, you've got access, you're not having to pay for a lot of those things. It makes development much more attractive. So what we've got proposed, that will be constructed as part of this development that's going on here, is continuing Hunterly Drive down here. And that would continue over, connecting to Johnswood Road. There's likely possibly going to be a roundabout in this location, I don't know, or just an intersection, we don't know. Maybe 20 years from now, there might be a roundabout there, in this location. And having a street that connects back up here across this property with, this would likely potentially be a big future commercial area there, right there at the interchange. So having connectivity, a parallel route that would also make this property really attractive for commercial development as well as possibly some of this other that's on the other side of it. Parallel to that, to the Parkway, to sort of extend some of the value of more of the property over here, having another local street that runs down here that connects and goes all the way down to Cherry Creek. Through there. So that increases connectivity so that we don't have a situation where it's always somebody's got to get back onto Bryant Parkway to get out. That we can go up on here, come out here, come over here, come up and go up that way. So that you've always got alternate routes. Increasing connectivity is important.
Is there any kind of a date set for the Bryant Parkway to get started?
I'm not sure. I mean, it's being worked on in terms of design now, but I know that it's set for the target. I can't remember what the bond millage, that sort of the target with that is. I think does anybody know?
Is it not 3 years? Did we not
Yeah.
start on December 1st?
See, True's got, yeah, y'all got me 3 years. Yeah,
3 years.
yeah. So there's 3 years.
To get it finished or started?
I think to get it finished, correct?
Yeah, you have to spend the funds within 3 years.
Yeah. Spend the funds, we had North Park. This North Park's not included. So the bond millage included this, and then this section that goes down here. It comes down, here's Hill Farm Elementary down. And so the south section, coming south of Show Road, then would come over across the railroad, tie in over here on the east side of the airport, and come down here, and come back out over to Reynolds. So we'd have a parallel connection. So if you're here at the school, come down and come out, and that would provide you a way where you didn't have to go through Reynolds to get back out to the interstate in the morning. Like that. But and let me sort of stress with this. So as part of the plan with this, that a lot of times it kind of shifts to this idea of, well, how do we pay for these things? So this is really a combination of either the city allocating money for projects like Parkway, or designating special funds out of general revenue or taxes or whatever to construct projects, grants, so using public funds to leverage grants to get sort of something bigger built. And then also sort of what we hope it will be a big part of this is private development. So putting these ideas down on paper, when someone comes in and develops this property, then that means that they have to build that street through there. And so that's a way that you can leverage private development. So that's also a reason why you connect the bike, pedestrian, and vehicle components together, because that enables you statutorily to require the developer to build all of those components as part of the sort of the street infrastructure that they're building out. So, that's sort of the idea.
When you build big streets like that, are you always building the utilities along with it?
So with let's say, like a street like Bryant Parkway,
Right,
not always. It just depends on the road.
okay.
A lot of times, if you're looking at it, you're asking the question, does it make sense? So we're getting the right of way. Is it going to make sense for us to have this infrastructure here that's going to help something? So let's say, for instance, you're building a new street through there, and in the area to the north, you've got some problems with sewer capacity, and this would be a great area for you to run a gravity sewer line, which is a lot less expensive than a force main. Meaning that gravity takes care of pumping that instead of actually buying a $250,000 pump to pump the sewage down. So in that situation, that would be somewhere where that would make sense, that we've got capacity issues up here and we've got to get them down to the sewer plant down here. If we build it along this corridor, then that's something that's going to make a lot of sense for the city to do. So it's one of those things, in each individual situation, the city would have to evaluate if they're building a street, does this make sense for us to put infrastructure in now?
Right. Is it less expensive to go ahead and put it in while you're putting the road in?
That would be probably a question that would be better answered by an engineer. I can tell you, if you're having to acquire additional easement, then whatever you buy today is going to be cheaper than what you buy tomorrow.
Right.
Yeah, there's tons of projects that talk to a city and they say, well, gosh, if we'd done that 15 years ago, it only cost us $1.5 million.
Right.
And then when you look at it sort of in the escalation, a lot of the costs of things have gone up a lot higher than the cost of inflation has. And so you say, yeah, that would cost us $5 million today when it was $1.5 million 10 years ago. So, any other questions, comments, snide remarks?
One thing I've noticed is that around this area is drivers don't have any regard for people on bicycles, walking. A lot of it is just stupidity. A lot of it's I don't care, and you need to be out of the way.
So it's part of that, I think, not to demean drivers. Part of it is that they're probably not used to seeing folks out, so that's one thing. There's been actually sociological studies that have showed that when you get behind the wheel, that the decisions that you make change, and the way that you perceive things is different. You're not necessarily as human as you are otherwise, and so that's kind of an aspect of it.
Like when you're on the internet?
Yeah. A lot of times when you're in a car and you see another car or something like that, they don't perceive it as a person, or it's maybe they feel like someone's invading their territory, and so part of that goes into that is education. Part of that is just people biking more. When you have an area where people know that bicyclists and pedestrians are going to be, they largely act more cautiously. They drive a whole lot more cautiously.
It's a matter of expectations. You're not expecting to see a bicycle, and you just don't look for them.
But if there's some kind of a sign that says bikers,
Yeah.
bike lane, have a better
We've been
chance.
such a rural community for so long, we're not expecting to see things like that.
I was thinking redneck area.
It's easier
Place
to
where
say.
perceptions changed recently is around 300 area, around Lake Momel, if you were to cycle out that way. It's very rural. In the past, you could count on being harassed being a cyclist now.
It's
Very
not
rare something
near
happens.
as rural anymore, it's more city.
No, still is, Lara, like past Pinnacle Mountain State Park.
Mhm.
up
Oh,
around Lake
well, I'm not
Walnut.
talking about that.
There's
part of it.
natural steps.
Yeah, yeah, just as an example where perceptions have changed though.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think as people see
Mhm.
more individuals doing something. And I will say this, so the flip side of that is bicyclists and pedestrians need to behave well. So you don't need to have bad
Yeah.
actors out there.
It's up to
I don't
you.
know how many times you end up having a situation
Way back.
where, you know, someone blows through an intersection with a bicyclist or something like that. I mean, you don't want to blame the bicyclists for bad things happening to them, but you certainly want bicyclists to behave. I mean, it's a, when you think about the battle of this, and my friend used to bike to work a whole lot, and he would have to approach it from the perspective of everybody has murderous intent because he doesn't know. And he's on a bicycle that he's pretty much defenseless. And if you
Right.
hit him, he's going to be injured. You hit the car, nothing's going to happen. And so you do want bicyclists to behave well, but I mean, in a situation, you've got to understand that those users are very vulnerable and are very easily injured. So cars need to take extra care anytime that those types of users are around.
Well, it's
The
just
saddest
like
thing is seeing-
motorcycles, though.
Yeah.
They slip up on you sometimes. No matter how much you tell yourself, I'm gonna look real close for motorcyclists,
You switch
Still
lanes and you
surprised.
realize they're there and you're just scared that you're
Yeah.
gonna hurt somebody.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been there as well.
Expect everybody to pull out.
Yeah.
And that's why we stay alive.
Other questions?
I have a question about Highway 5
Mm-hmm.
going through Bryant. So I guess they're expecting to widen Highway 5 as they go through Bryant.
Mhm.
So are they going to include, I guess who's funding that? Is that a state project? Or is
That's a state project.
Okay, so are they then beholden to our plan? So if we show that, hey, we would like a bike lane on
I think they're so far into the process that, in the design process, that it's kind of a little bit late. They actually, in that situation, I think both Benton and Bryant would prefer a trail instead of bike lanes.
Okay.
And the reason being, how many have driven down the Otter Creek section?
I don't wanna be on the bike.
The-
Wide shoulder.
The bike lanes, I prefer to call them trash lanes. They're the area where tree limbs